Welcome to today's story about the most pivotal moment in the Gospel of Matthew. Today we talk about the Canaanite woman. And the incredible thing about the Canaanite woman is she does something that no other mortal, as far as I can tell, has ever done, or probably will ever do. She actually changes Christ. Now, Christ obviously has changed a lot of people, but it doesn't happen in reverse very often. In fact, as far as I can tell, just this once. So that's what makes it such an exciting story. So let's take this story in context. Jesus meets the Canaanite woman between the feeding of the 5,000 and the feeding of the 4,000. And he travels across the Sea of Galilee. As a matter of fact, he walks across it. And he goes from Bethsaida, which is a Jewish town, to the Gerasenes, which is a Gentile town. And we all know that he breaks loaves and fishes and feeds the multitudes. These stories are both collectively called the feeding of the multitudes. But in the first case, he breaks 5 loaves. And not coincidentally, there are 5 books in the Torah. And there are 12 baskets of leftovers. Not coincidentally, there are 12 tribes of Israel. Now, similarly, once he gets to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, he feeds again, this time 4,000 Gentiles and their families. And he takes 7 loaves, and there are 7 baskets of leftovers. Well, 7 is a very important number in the Bible. In fact, it's included in the first chapter. God creates heaven and earth in 7 days. So 7 very particularly means the whole of creation. In other words, not just a small gathering of tribes of Israel, but now that 7 means the whole entire universe. What on earth could be so powerful that it changed the Son of God, changed his mind completely? Traveling over that, walking through the lake was almost like a baptism for Christ, if that were even possible, because he went in with one attitude and he came out with a completely different attitude. Well, the Canaanite woman was largely responsible. And actually the interaction between the Canaanite woman and Christ, on the surface, it seems very negative, even quite rude. The place where he meets her is actually Phoenicia, which isn't, strictly speaking, Canaan. It's about a part of the historical Canaan, but Canaan doesn't really exist anymore. It was the pejorative term used specifically for the enemy of Israel as they swept into Israel and pushed the Canaanites out. The Israelites were the goodies, the Canaanites were the baddies, and it was as simple as that. So when he refers to her as a Canaanite, that is pejorative, that's rude. And he doesn't stop his rudeness there either. He basically says with his disciples, how do we get rid of this woman? She's really pestering us. And then he sort of refers to her as a dog. He says, we don't take the food from the children of Israel and feed it to the dogs. But something incredible happens, and that is that, remember, Jesus, like the rest of the Pharisees in that area who worshipped at synagogues and taught at synagogues, is in fact a rabbi. And one of the highest honors that you can possibly bestow upon a rabbi is to allow them to argue the Torah. So notice when Jesus interacts with the Pharisees, it's very often quite heated, quite interesting. And of course, Jesus slam dunks them with the his argument of the Torah every time. But in this case, this humble Canaanite woman actually stumps Jesus. She has a retort of which Jesus really doesn't have an answer other than say, wow, I think you're going to get what you want. She says, even the master has bread that falls with crumbs to the floor for the dogs to eat. So she is humble in a sense, but in another sense, she is being incredibly rabbinical, and she is actually doing a slam dunk on Jesus, just like Jesus did on all the other rabbis and Pharisees that he encounters. So this completely changes her mind. So let's just read the story and see how powerful it is. And behold, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and cried, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely possessed by a demon." But he did not answer her a word. And his disciples came and begged him, saying, "Send her away, for she's crying after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." And he answered, "It is not fair to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire." And her daughter was instantly healed. Wow. That is an amazing story. So Jesus has this interaction with the Canaanite woman, and he goes from feeding the 5,000, saying he's not going to have anything to do with Gentiles, going to the other side of the Sea of Galilee and feeding Gentiles with the word of God and with the bread of heaven. Absolutely incredible story. But you know, there isn't just a pull for Jesus towards the Gentiles, there's also a push. And that is, the Pharisees did their fair share of pushing Jesus away from his own tradition. Now, those Pharisees were incredibly religious people, and that means that they have either a complex set of rules or a complex set of theology. One's is the same as the other. To which, if you don't adhere, then as far as they're concerned, you're going to hell. You're not one of them. So listen to the interactions between Jesus and the Pharisees. That's the other rabbis, remember, in this area before he arrives and meets the Canaanite woman. He calls them a brood of vipers. And then the Pharisees accuse him of eating with tax collectors of sinners, which of course he proudly does. And then the Pharisees ask him, "How come the Pharisees fast and we're so pious, and you and your disciples don't fast?" They accuse him of being the devil himself. He cast out demons by the prince of demons. Then when the disciples are picking grain on the Sabbath, they are accused of doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath. They plot from then on how to destroy him. Then, actually, the encounter between the 5,000 and the 4,000 with a Pharisee is he gets approached by scribes and Pharisees, and they say, "You're not washing your hands properly." And by that, they're not accusing him necessarily of being physically uncleanly, you're supposed to do something very specific, and that is you pour water on your hand, your left hand, 3 times with your right hand, and then you switch, and then you pour water on your right hand with your left hand 3 times. And that's very specifically prescribed in the Torah, and the disciples weren't doing that. Well, that was the straw for Jesus that broke the camel's back. He didn't really want to have anything more to do with the ultra religious. And he went to people, though they were Gentile, they were humble. And that's where he found fertile ground for the gospel to flourish. So in this encounter, his heart hardens towards the Pharisees and the religious Jews. And there's some religious Christians out there as well. He tells them that your doctrines and precepts are not of God, but of men. And at the same time, his heart melts towards this humble Canaanite woman with a sick daughter and the entire world of Gentiles. A religion for Israel becomes a faith for the entire